everyone, and welcome to a special edition of Weather University. The tropics, as you know, are getting quite active, and my mentor, John Bernier, has always said to me when I came here, hey, Matt, beware of the eye storm. And I'm not talking about an eye as an optical eye. We're talking about, of course, the alphabet letter I. And I said, that's something that we probably need to explore a little bit more. So I bring in the man, the myth, the legend himself. There he is, John Bernier. First of all, John, thanks for joining us. How is life in retirement?
Life in retirement is pretty good, but speaking of eye and the eye storm, my eyes see none of your screen.
Oh, your eyes see none of my screen.
Yep.
Well, let's try to do that. Now you'll see.
There we go.
There we go. Good deal. So now you can see everything. And obviously, John, you're still following the weather quite actively. We message all the time. And starting on Saturday, of course, the European member and some of its ensembles started to hint at this potential tropical development, maybe sliding into North Carolina. And then, as models do, it took it away. And of course, as models do, it brings it back.
And it takes it away, and it brings it back. It's like, it's like tease me, please me.
Yeah. And so, I came here in 2004, shortly after Hurricane Isabel, one of the most major ice storms in our recent years. And I'll bring up this graphic here so we can kind of talk about that. You always have said to me for 21 years, Matt, beware of the ice storm. And let's talk about this. We'll start with Isabel. Your recollection on Isabel. And of course, the reason why we're talking about this is because the storm we're going to be talking about in just a few minutes could be Imelda. The ice storm. So let's talk a little bit about Isabel.
Right. All right. So Isabel, which of course was in 2003, is the single most impactful storm to hit Richmond. Okay. Gaston was visually vivid with the flooding and the cars in Chaco Bottom and the flooding in Bottoms Up Pizza, the downtown expressway. But for sheer impact on life in Richmond, it was Isabel. Realizing this, that, Dominion Virginia Power has their service areas. Norfolk area, Richmond area, 95% of the customers, not people, because remember, it's customers when they talk about the outages. Okay, lights were out. Some places out for 2 weeks. Our boss at the time, one of our bosses at the time, thought covering hurricanes was really fun and really interesting. Until that person had to take cold showers for 2 weeks until the power came back. So,
and then to have 2 tornado outbreaks during the time of recovery as well.
Yeah, during the time of recovery, we had several tornado outbreaks that we had to deal with because we actually had tornadoes on the Monday. Was it the Sunday or the Monday right after the storm?
Right.
So it was. I think it was Monday. So it was a very impactful storm. Now, one of the things to realize is you've got to look backwards a little bit at these things. It's like, okay, well, what made Isabel so bad?
Right.
If you go back to 1999 to 2002,
super dry,
3-year long drought.
Yep.
3-year long drought, to the point at which I am in July of 2002 at a meeting at the Library of Virginia, and I flat out asked Mark Warner, when are you going to put a mandatory statewide water ban in effect? And Governor Warner was like, and then a couple of weeks later, he said, we're putting a watering ban in effect. And of course, as soon as the politicians acted, what happened?
It starts to rain.
It poured.
Right.
It poured from basically that point in August of 2002 to when Isabel got there. We're talking 5 feet of rain.
So your ground is super saturated.
Yes. All these trees that had been stressed out by that drought, now the ground is super saturated. There's nothing to hold them in. And if you go back and look at all the pictures, a lot of the trees that come down, it's root ball and everything up. They're just pulled straight up.
Right. And so that, by toppling trees, takes down power lines, knocking out power to customers. And as you said, the largest power outage for Dominion history until
Well, actually, that still stands as the largest
Is
one.
it? I thought that Irene beat it.
No, Irene didn't beat it because Irene did not have Irene was more coastal.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You have to remember that Isabel came in South Cape Hatteras,
Yep.
went across North Carolina, and actually went right between Richmond and Farmville, which originally the thought was it was going to curve through the eastern part of the state. It was going to curve up and go up basically from Southampton County up through the northern neck. And then that track shifted and it went further to the west and into the mountains associated with that, which, of course, they had taken college students from down in the Hampton Roads area
Right.
and were evacuating them. They sent them to Longwood. So
Which
they actually
was
got closer to the center of the storm.
exactly what you don't want to do. But yeah.
Right,
So,
right.
yeah. So, and since you mentioned it, I brought up that path of Isabel as it cut across the southern part and then the southwestern part of the state there. So you can see, and again, that would pass right over Longwood University. All right. So let's roll back here for a second then. So my mistake on that, I thought that Irene surpassed it, but we all know that Irene was a pretty massive storm. Between Isabel and Irene, we did have the remnants of Ivan, another ice storm responsible for the largest single-day tornado outbreak in the state of Virginia.
40 of them.
Crazy day.
Crazy day. And one of the things that goes on with tornadoes and tornado outbreaks is usually, it starts here and then it goes here and then here and then here. No, they were dotted all over the place.
Right. It was like a Christmas light just popping off and on all over the place.
Yeah, exactly right. Biggest one up in Remington.
Yep.
That was the strongest of the day. And of course, this goes traditionally with what decaying tropical systems do. Most of the tornadoes, they are the lower ends, EF0s, EF1s, and occasionally an EF2 are a little bit stronger.
Correct.
Not like these big monsters you see roaring through the southern plains.
Right. So that takes us out of 2004. We wait a couple of years, and that brings us to Hurricane Irene, which, as you said, was a coastal storm passing pretty much almost right up the Chesapeake Bay from the Outer Banks right up.
Yeah, it did. It went into the Outer Banks, then curved, came back out, and then, of course, it went up and decayed to a tropical storm and literally went right up, right up through Manhattan, the middle of Manhattan that went through. Of course, tremendous flooding up there. That created, again, a lot of power issues for us here, but mainly from Richmond eastward. It was weaker in the western part of the state. Still had a pretty good amount of rain associated with that. And of course, we had tree damage that came down.
Right.
But one of the things to remember, one thing with trees, the tree can only hit one house once.
Correct.
If that makes any sense. Not like flooding that can, the flooding that can get my house, get your house, and get the next person down
Right, because
road.
the flooding is so widespread, whereas a tree is only 100 feet tall, let's say, or something.
100 feet tall and very isolated. What was interesting with Irene, besides being named after my mother-in-law, was the fact that it went inland and it actually caused a tremendous amount of damage on the sound side in the Outer Banks.
Mm-hmm.
So like you go down the Berry Islands in the Outer Banks, the sound side there had a tremendous amount of damage. There's a very famous picture of a gentleman named Billy Stimpson. He and his daughter, I think her daughter's name is Erin, sitting on the stairs of what used to be their Soundside cottage that was one of the oldest ones in the Outer Banks, built in the Soundside. Of course, the hook on all of this is that he was actually from Central Virginia. He was actually from the Metro Richmond area.
Interesting. And at that point, the sound had swallowed their house, I'm assuming, because of
There was nothing. They were just sitting on steps. The house was completely gone.
Yeah. And then that brings up something that happens in big time storms that roll up the coast for us is that Chesapeake Bay slosh, because the winds are coming in from the east. Initially, it takes the eastern side of the Chesapeake, throws it up against our tidal counties, and then swashes it the other way.
Yeah. If you go back to a good example of that, you go back to Gloria, which was 1985, went through the Outer Banks, really didn't do much here, wind, a little bit of rain. And then the next day it was 90 something degrees over us because you get a lot of hot air on the backside of these storms often. But that actually, when it made landfall in Buxton, Cape Hatteras, actually drained the harbor.
It's incredible. Totally
Yeah.
incredible. Yeah. I
Yep.
mean, very
Shows the
powerful.
power of the winds.
And then my favorite storm that I couldn't say the entire time it was here, Hurricane Isaias, which came into southern North Carolina. It was a minimal hurricane. However, where it passed through, which again was our coastal tidal counties, it
Yep.
came through early in the morning, started about 2 a.m. It wasn't monster for winds, but it did rack up a tremendous amount of tornadoes.
Several tornadoes.
Yeah, from
Yep.
Suffolk all the way through to coastal counties up on the northern neck, Burgess
Yep.
and those points, Stingray Point.
Up by Kilmarnock, up there in Lancaster County, that area, that actually had probably the strongest tornado. Not connected to the tornado, but that's where one of the fatalities occurred in that storm. That was whether they don't believe it was tornado related, but that was one of the fatalities occurred with that.
Right.
Was that also the storm that messed up where you were going for holiday on the beach?
I was supposed to go that following week to Emerald Isle or Atlantic
Yeah.
Beach or something like that. And that
Yeah.
unfortunately became a no can do because that beach was completely shut down to all outsiders, rightfully so, because it completely
Right.
destroyed the beach there. I'm going to bring up something that you asked me to bring up when we were talking off air, and this is Hurricane Hazel. And there's a reason why this is not an ice storm, but as you mentioned, back in 1954, we didn't have satellites floating in space. So
Right.
we only could know based on reports of what these storms were. There could have been a storm floating out there.
There could have been something floating out there. Just the important part of looking at Hazel is that you look at that track that goes right up across central Virginia. And that storm actually, I believe, set some rainfall records over us here.
Mm-hmm.
Also set some wind and pressure records at the time around our area. And of course, the lowest barometric pressure ever recorded in Richmond, surprisingly, was in the superstorm in 1993 that came right over us.
Right. And so I actually have this interactive map that I found on Hurricane Hazel. And if we kind of zoom in, you can see, I mean, it really much passed from just to the east of South Hill, that faint line there,
Yep.
to, it looks like Powhatan, Goochland, right up into Lake Anna, and then all the way up to Frederick, Maryland. So right on the west side there. And, it's interesting. We call them, Saffir-Simpson scales. I guess back then it was known as the H scale. It was a Hurricane 4 with
Right.
winds of 115 knots, and you could do the math if you'd like to, so about 120, 125 in that range. So, but pretty interesting line there, that going all the way up, and it was a very strong storm. So
Yeah. Now, the thing to remember back then is that's before the Great Sun Belt migration began in the 70s and
Right.
80s. So population here was much, much lower than what we had. Because you remember, Chesterfield County, compare like 1970, 1969, 1970 when Camille came in, and now, I don't have the number sitting right in front of me, but Chesterfield County has probably grown almost 500% in its population.
Yeah.
And you would say that's just kind of the same thing for Henrico and Hanover getting going. In fact, back at that time,
Mhm.
There were parts of Hanover, like just off of 295. You get off of what is Pole Green Road. That time in Hazel, that area did not have electricity
Wow. Right. So
because there was farmland, and the farmers at both ends of what is Pole Green Road would not give Virginia Power, which is now Dominion, the rights to run the power
the
lines
rights to
across
run the
there.
power lines through. Yeah.
Yeah. So
That all changed.
Yeah.
Let's go on to the next thing, which of course is what we're talking about today. Let me go back to this satellite view. This is not a really well organized disturbance yet. I mean, you see the blow up the red on the east side of the storm and the west
Right.
side. It's not, that's why it's still a disturbance, a tropical wave. But we
A
do
blob.
think blob. You want
A
to call
blob.
it? Yeah. But over time, we are expecting this could become Imelda. And again, that puts us in the ice storm, the reason for this discussion here today, John. You look at this, and again, I think, based on what we're looking at here, and I'll show you some cool stuff that we're starting to show. This really has, I think, the potential in the next 36 hours to become Imelda. And then, of course, the models, of course, are trying to get an idea of where it's going. How do you like this, John? These are all the models. just to
Yeah,
give you something to look at.
folks, this is the we refer to him as the spaghetti models, and he's just taken the whole box of San Giorgio and thrown it against the map.
So what we'll do is we'll just quickly bring this down to something else for you so you can kind of see. We'll use some of our main models that kind of work in the hurricane favor, some mid to short range. And again, use the time as a discretionary thing because the development of this storm will slow it down, etc. But there's a potential for some sort of landfall, maybe between Charleston, South Carolina to, let's say, Wilmington, give or take, 50 miles, whatever,
Right. Right.
sometime Monday afternoon, Monday evening, Monday night, right?
Tuesday or potentially Tuesday.
Right.
Again, it depends upon, first of all, you have to, first of all, folks, what we're looking at is, as I always like to use the analogy of the box of brownies.
Right.
We're holding up the box of brownies right now. Okay. They look real nice on the cover, but we're just starting to mix the ingredients.
Yep.
Haven't even, the oven's warming up. We don't know what's coming out of the oven quite yet. So that's the whole deal.
And John, so I have a graphic to kind of talk about that a little bit. We're sitting at day 5/day 4. We're starting to look at the development of the storm. At the third line there, we're reviewing the different spaghetti plots, if you will, trying to get an idea of where this might go, how this will develop. John, for you, I want you to look back to day 6+, that specific second line. Don't believe forecasts in social media.
Oh, dude.
Yeah.
It's cherry picking the models is what it is in
Correct.
social media.
Yep, exactly.
And folks, the example I am going to give you of this, why don't run with social media? Several weeks ago, like 2-3 weeks ago, there was a disturbance just roaring across the Atlantic. Looking good. It was the box of brownies looking good.
Right.
Okay. Immediately, what used to be a reputable news organization, Newsweek, just jumped on it and said, here are the tracks that Gabrielle could take. Well, folks, the oven didn't work. The brownies got burnt, dry air, dust out of the Sahara got into the storm, and it just fizzled. It just went poof, like a balloon losing air. Okay. But in the era of social media now, understand how it works. They get paid based on the number of people who click on it
and like, for sure. Yep.
Who bite the bait and click
and share it. And that's the thing. The shares grow. Let me go back to that graphic for a quick second. So tomorrow will be kind of day 4. You trust the expert, John, yourself, me, the team here, with, okay, what could be the worst case scenario? And for us, the models are going to change, and we're going to continue to focus on the different tracks and what those changes may be. But John, I think you can definitely agree that, this is not something, at least as we see now, coming into Virginia Beach. It's not taking an Isabel track. Worst case scenario, probably not going to be a Category 5 storm. This is not a Hugo, right? So,
not a Hugo, which went into Isle of Palms. Back in 1989, correct. And actually,
which was a Category 4,
did more in southwestern Virginia than it did here, because it passed so far to the west and it collapsed, destroyed Charlotte in North Carolina. Here are the couple of things to remember. We've got 3 things in play. Of course, we have Gabrielle. Let's head into the Azores. Winds are starting to pick up there, and that's moving on out of the way. You've got Umberto, that is moving up through. And that's to the east, and you've got what is potentially going to be Imelda. Now, there are essentially 3 different scenarios. Imelda goes like the air going out of the balloon, really doesn't develop into anything, and just kind of becomes a disturbed area of weather. That's some rainfall coming through. You've got Imelda develops into a tropical storm, a minimal hurricane.
And that's what let me bring this up while we're talking here. There's the intensity forecast for what could be Imelda. Majority have tropical storm beginning somewhere 24 to 36 hours from now. And then you get into that 96-hour range. We start to push maybe to category 1. Of course, there's always one model that's going to be super ambitious going all the way to category 2. So we call that an outlier. So we kind of say, let's hold off on that.
Let's hold off, but let's say we get a strong tropical storm, minimal hurricane, in which there kind of is no difference between those two. It's kind of a Gaston mode. We're not saying this storm is another Gaston.
Right.
Stress that.
Yeah.
Okay, but the Gaston mode, which Gaston was listed as a tropical storm, went back, looked at all the data, was upgraded to a hurricane. Or what happens is this thing goes bonkers.
Yep.
It goes bonkers. Now, the blob is just showers that come through, locally heavy rain that could cause some problems. Going bonkers introduces another aspect of this, where this storm and Umberto, that's going to become strong. Umberto is forecast to become a Category 4 storm, strong Category 3 to Category 4 storm. Those two start to interact with each other.
Right. So you're talking about something that we call the Fujiwara effect. And just to kind of put this up here. So the current storm tracks show Imelda going into, let's say, South Carolina and Umberto going out to the north and east, right? No impact on us at all. But sometimes these two storms get close enough. And John, you can see the graphic here. They rotate around a common center point, which I put for that dot there.
Right.
And typically, John, the weaker storm would get absorbed in this type of scenario.
Right. So in this type scenario, and I think Imelda's got to be a stronger storm for this to happen, Imelda would get pulled out into the Atlantic. So it would come up, it looks like, whoa, it's coming here. That's like, hang a right.
Right.
But some of the models earlier on, especially the Canadian model, are actually showing how that would cause Umberto to pivot back towards the northeastern part of the country. And that's kind of the big worry there. Again, that's an outlier scenario.
Right. But again, and the reason why that happens is you see Imelda going toward Umberto and Umberto going back toward the U.S., again, rotating around that central point, if you will. The weaker storm typically gets absorbed here. In rare cases, and it's extremely rare, but it has happened, where two storms of close to equal strength will combine to create a larger, and this is an important word, sized storm, not Category 6. Please ignore TikTok. There's no such thing as a Category 6. This is not going to strengthen into a behemoth storm. It might grow in size as it absorbs, and they become.
If you want to dream about Category 6, go get the book Category 6 that Bill Evans wrote.
Right.
That's a novel. It was a novel, folks, about a storm.
So
no, that's the thing. The storm actually, you're right, expands in size. The wind field expands in size.
Right.
Which that creates more problems on its own. The more likely scenario, of course, is the one in the middle, where we get this strong tropical storm, minimal hurricane.
Yep.
Now that becomes the fact that as Umberto goes out into the ocean, and Imelda comes towards the coastline, you start looking to the north up towards the Great Lakes and up towards western Pennsylvania, you get a large fair weather system that builds in there. And what that does is creates a northeasterly wind down over us. Okay.
Yep.
Umberto's that pushes Umberto away, but by settling down over us here, that basically steers what would be Imelda into basically Myrtle Beach, Wilmington area, and possibly hanging up over North Carolina. Kind of like how Florence 7 years ago got hung up there, but this would be a much weaker storm than Florence. But what could lead to is, again, the coastal regions of the Carolinas, potential for tornadoes, and of course, heavy rainfall. And then we're talking about maybe moderate to heavy rain moving into the inland areas, upstate South Carolina, and of course, towards the Smoky Mountains, which is where Helene did all of its devastation.
Correct. And that's something that'll bring this back up here as we look at those spaghetti models on what would then be Imelda. You look at that turn through central South Carolina, the upslope region of South Carolina, which would put the rain on the north side. And as you just said, Helene was exactly a year ago today to this recording.
Mm-hmm.
And this could be, insult to injury, where many areas are still in major recovery mode. I mean, they got so devastated, 20, 30, 40 inches of rain. And remember, that also fell in the mountains, which then slid down and created a mud river. And, oh, it was disaster.
Right.
Disaster.
So let's stress this will not be a Helene for them, because
Correct.
Helene had a what we call a precursor event,
Yep.
an event that came through and brought them rainfall before.
Yep.
Okay, but you still have a lot of problems with the infrastructure there.
Yeah. There's
Tremendous number of problems with the infrastructure.
there are many bridges that have not been even replaced yet at all. Right. Exactly.
Oh, no, not at all. I
Yeah.
mean, the people who are without homes, and the power infrastructure, the telecom infrastructure. Let's face it, we're all wired to the internet now,
Yep.
and it's stuff. And if you go back to Superstorm Sandy that had the fires in New York, they had a big controversy there. I think it was on Staten Island, where when Verizon came back in, they said, we're not running traditional telephone wires anymore. We're
Yeah.
putting you all on basically these wireless repeaters. You'll have the home phone, but it's essentially kind of the same mode as how if you have a phone through Verizon Fios, or you have a phone through Comcast, their phone. That's essentially, it's voice over IP is what it is, what it's called. But that's essentially what they're looking at down there.
Right. And John, I think what you bring, and I'm bringing up this graphic here one more time. I think you bring up a really good point because of where this is and the timeline we're talking about. Now, this water here throughout the Bahamas is bath water. It's my type of water, not your type of water. I get that. That's fine. But I mean, it will have some time to strengthen. And we talked about possibly tropical storm, minimal hurricane, but it's going to be so close to land. A lot of times we see friction effects, which prevent it from really spinning up supercharged.
Because it's so close to land,
Right.
it's getting friction. It's getting essentially, a rug burn.
Yep.
By going over the land, when it's out over the ocean, which is a smooth surface, it has a lot of time to spin up and develop. And of course, one of the other things that people, of course, been asking about is, wait a minute, we're going to say there's going to be all these storms coming through this year, and they haven't. This has been a season that's been sluggish to get going.
Yes.
Although we're seeing a pattern. Of course, this is also going to the increased number of storms. We're getting more and more storms after the autumnal equinox, first day of fall.
Yep.
A couple of things are going on in here. And Ben Knoll at the Washington Post actually had a really good article about 2 weeks ago from this. One of the things that's gone on this summer, the tropical Atlantic, so it's the area down, you're really down low. You're below Puerto Rico in those areas.
Yep.
Okay. The water temperatures there have actually been a little bit cooler than usual, while a little further to the north, they've been warmer than usual.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you don't have as great a south to north difference temperature wise, which is something that's needed to spin storms up.
Yep.
The other thing is we've had a lot of dust coming through, and we've kind of had an unfavorable pattern in the atmosphere. There's this big thing called the Madden-Julian oscillation, which is this like long-term weather pattern that slides through. That's actually been in an unfavorable mode for tropical weather for a while, but we could see a pattern that becomes more favorable that was coming our way and has just started to move in over us here. So the next few weeks could be busier.
Busier than it has been, right? But
Right.
not to the forecast that was created. I mean, because as you said, we're also on the downside of the tropical timeline, if you will.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. We're starting to move into where they get weaker and weaker. We're starting to lose the impetus for the Cabo Verde, actually, what they should be called now because they changed the name of the country. Type storms that just come all the way across, and we sit and watch them. We talk about them for 2 weeks on the air. It's like waiting for the baby to show up.
Yeah.
It's like waiting for the baby to show up to finally get through here to where now development's going to be further west, and of course they'll move more towards the Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah. So I think the thing that people need to take away from this, number one, this could become an ice storm. It is not going to be an Isabel or an Irene or an Ivan, that kind of a thing as we talk, or an Isaias, but that there is potential for some possibly significant rain Monday night, Tuesday, maybe into Wednesday, depending on how this all kind of falls apart, right? Or comes together, I should say, with the high pressures you mentioned coming in from New England. That's going to be interesting too, because that could, if it's strong enough, it deflects it further south. Our rain could be less. If it's weaker, it slides more north. The rain could be more.
Yeah. Now, you would say right now you put the heaviest rain through North Carolina and the southern half of Virginia. Versus northward up towards Washington or up into Maryland.
But the point is, this is, as we just said earlier, too, this is 5 days out from potential, quote unquote, landfall. So there's a lot of time that we have to look at these models, and the models will get better and better as we get into the short range models, which are allowed to have more data, more grid points. The fine tuning gets a lot better as well. And it really does take off, so.
And one of the things to remember when you look at the action line of things to do going out 5 days, really 5 days, a hurricane forecast that's 5 days out has an inaccuracy of about 240 miles on average. And a lot of this is planning. It's like, okay, if we're going into North Carolina, we have, military bases. We'll get, Seymour Johnson Air Force Base. What do you do then? Well, we got to start making plans to tell those pilots, get the planes, fly them out. You start, looking at, if you are in emergency management, start getting preparations for what you are going to do. Like where are we going to start looking at places that we'll have to evacuate from? Let's start getting the infrastructure ready for evacuation.
And then you're also looking at staging crews to return power or to open up roads, those types of things. Because when you start talking about that, especially along coastal communities, I mean, a lot of South Carolina, North Carolina is all barrier islands, and we see them get washed over time and time again.
And one of the things you've seen, a lot of these pictures that if you go down onto Hatteras Island, but they just lost the 12th home in like the past 5 or 10 years, I believe.
Yeah, in like Buxton or something. Yeah, right?
Yeah, that house was in Buxton, which is Cape Hatteras. But it's Hatteras Island where most of them have been up in Rodanthe. Remember, barrier islands, if you go back 30, 40 years ago, where those houses were, had a lot of beach going out, but those islands have shifted. They've shifted because of erosion. Dennis and Floyd back-to-back in 1999 did a big number destroying the dune system down there. And that's, even still, probably wiser if they'd been on the inland side of the road, the highway, but.
Yeah, barrier islands were put there by weather, and they will be taken away by weather. They were really not meant to be built on.
Right.
Growing up on Long Island, all of Fire Island is a barrier island. All of the inlets were cut in by major storms. And, they continue to be eroded time and time again and rebuilt just like North Carolina. So,
And, and these beach replenishment projects are just a very short-term fix because they get washed away once again.
They do get washed away. John, I want to thank you for joining me. Any final thoughts on this potential for Imelda that you'd like to add? I mean, I think we kind of covered it pretty well.
I think we have. I think, again, let's wait and see what happens. Again, one of the questions, remember this, folks, for us, it's probably not a windstorm. It's a rainstorm. Are we going to be able to handle the drainage? I mean, you had the storms on last Saturday that created the flash flooding downtown. And, what is it, gave the Richmond Spiders, what was it, the 7-hour-long football game or something like that?
I mean, that storm never moved. It started at like 1:30 and sat there. It was like, are you kidding me? Wow. Yeah. Just, crazy stuff. But yeah. And I think the other thing to remember, to point out too, as you said, a rainstorm, not a windstorm. And if the storm stays well to our south, we don't end up on that east side for the low top potential twisting.
Right. And that's the one thing, that's, again, another thing to watch. And again, remember, the tornadoes that come from tropical systems are generally quick and relatively weak.
Right.
Relatively weak, but of course, if the roof's gone from the house, it's a problem no matter what.
And as you and I well know, Florence created relatively weak, but it destroyed the Dominion Flooring Company. The gentleman there passed away because of it. I mean, so you take all severe weather seriously, and that's the takeaway there.
And what people don't realize, and from that storm, we can talk a little bit about inside stuff here, was that tornado actually went, well, basically about less than half a mile from Matt's left shoulder, where it is right now.
Right.
That's how close it came to the television station.
Yep.
And our boss at the time was like, this equipment we have, it's just not precise enough for it. And that's went out and made a huge investment in the technology that we use.
Correct. I remember during that day, he said to me, as we were both live on the air, I think you were talking, he came in, said in my ear, he goes, you need to tell me if we need to move our people into a safer spot in this building. And when we were tracking stuff, I even said live on the air, this is to our general manager, put people in the hallways now. And the Exxon station, which is on the corner from here, lost its roof because of, twisting winds and, whatever. So, but you're 100% right. The reason why we have the Viper system, and you and I bargained for years for the Viper system, was exactly for this purpose, to track severe weather better than anything else out there.
That's exactly right.
Yep. So, and you and I have had numerous days on the air talking and talking. So, yeah.
And talking and going and going and going. So, yeah.
Yep. John, of course, I'm going to have you back at the end of October, beginning of November, because you and I are going to work on, somebody asked me this today, the winter outlook for Central Virginia and whether we think it'll be feet of snow, boo, or inches of snow at best, and whether we think there could be the dreaded ice storm, or maybe it's mild and we're playing golf all winter, John.
You want to play the golf. I would like a little bit of snow.
John, you're north of the Mason-Dixon line now. You now will get a lot of snow.
But no, I'm south of the Mason-Dixon line.
Oh,
I'm not that far north. Feet of snow for us here is now extremely rare.
Right.
Matt's been working on a bunch of graphics regarding historical snowfall, and you can see how the trend is just down.
It really is. Yeah.
It really is. It really is. And, again, that even has economic impacts on things that have been done, recreation and stuff. Really, we've had some blips, but really you've got to go back to the 1960s, which was the decade where the snow just hammered the eastern part of the country.
There was a period, as I remember building that graphic, and we'll show it when we do this. I think there was about 7 of the 10 years that, it was incredible amounts of snow. So that's what, and then there was a few times in the 70s as well. So, but so, all right, JB, I can't thank you enough for your time as always. And we will catch up soon.
Yes.
And we will continue to watch this, and I'm sure we'll be chatting on this.
All right.
And again, you guys, you heard it from the man himself, JB. Of course, we're talking about the potential for Imelda, but, take what we're talking about seriously, understand what we're looking at in the different models, and wait for the forecast to continue to be refined. I hope you all have a great night.